Have you ever noticed how easy it is to imagine everything going wrong right before a performance? You're backstage, maybe warming up, maybe just waiting, and your mind starts running through the possibilities. A memory slip at the worst possible moment. Your bow arm starting to shake during the quiet passage. Missing the high note or a big shift. Sometimes these thoughts show up so automatically that they just become part of the background noise of performance day. It doesn't feel great for our mind to hang out in this place, but here's the question that actually matters. Does any of this follow us onto the stage and affect what happens when we play? Hi, I'm Noah Kageyama. I'm a performance psychologist and Juilliard-trained violinist, and I translate research from the performance science literature into practical strategies to help you practice smarter and perform your best when it matters most. Today, I want to share a study that looked directly at this question, whether the mental images that go through our mind backstage before a performance actually carry over into the performance itself. This one comes from the UK, where a team of British researchers recruited 60 participants for a public speaking study. Everyone started with a short questionnaire to get a baseline sense of how anxious they were feeling. Then they were randomly divided into 3 groups and given very different things to think about. The first group, the negative imagery group, was asked to recall a time when they had to give a speech and were worried they wouldn't do well. Then they were given 5 minutes to vividly imagine giving a speech in that same situation where they performed terribly. They were even asked to describe the scene out loud to the experimenter in as much detail as possible, how they would look, how they would sound, how the audience would respond, and so forth. The second group, the positive imagery group, was asked to do the opposite. They were asked to recall a time when they felt like a speech was going to go really well. Then they imagined the best possible outcome, seeing the whole thing go well and describing it in just as much vivid detail. And the third group, the control group, was asked to recall, describe, and imagine an experience as well. But the goal here was to make their experience a more neutral one, so they were asked to simply describe a shopping trip. After all of this, participants were told they had 30 seconds to prepare a 4-minute speech on the pros and cons of living in London, which would be videotaped and evaluated later by a group of psychologists. When their prep time was up, they stepped in front of a camera while the experimenter sat behind them and delivered their speech in one take. After completing their speech, everyone rated how anxious they had felt during the delivery, how well they thought they performed, how nervous they thought they appeared to others, how often they had negative thoughts during their speech, and to what degree they actually believed those thoughts in the moment. They also filled out an 18-item behavior questionnaire, which is used to evaluate the outwardly visible aspects of nerves. Basically, it involves rating yourself from 0 to 8 in a variety of different areas like confident, relaxed, awkward, sweating, blushing, and so on. On every single one of these measures, the negative imagery group came out worse. They experienced more anxiety during their speech than the positive imagery group did. They thought they performed worse. They thought they looked more visibly anxious to others. They had more frequent negative thoughts during their speech. And perhaps most notably, these intrusive negative thoughts also felt more valid and true when they showed up. In other words, spending those few minutes imagining a performance going badly in advance was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, leading to increased anxiety, a louder inner critic, and more difficulty staying in the moment. Separately, a research assistant also watched each videotaped speech and filled out the same behavior questionnaire for each participant. This gave the researchers a way to compare how the participants thought they were coming across to how they actually appeared to someone watching from the outside. When the researchers compared the participants' self-ratings with the independent observer ratings, they found that both groups thought they performed worse and looked more nervous to the observer than they actually came across. In other words, our inner critic tends to think much worse of us than others do. And this gap between perception and reality was even more significant for the negative imagery group. The average difference between how they thought they came across and how the observer actually rated them was 37 points for the negative imagery group, compared to about 22 for the positive imagery group. So the negative imagery group didn't just feel worse about how they did, they also had a more distorted view of the reality. Their inner critic wasn't just louder during their speech, it was also more convincing. So how do we put this into practice? There's a moment in the documentary The Last Dance where Michael Jordan asks, sort of rhetorically, why would I imagine missing a shot I haven't even taken yet? I think that's actually a pretty good framing for the main takeaway of this study. What we think about and imagine before a performance doesn't just stay in our heads, it can also travel with us onto the stage. The good news is that the opposite is also true. The positive imagery group in the study didn't do all that much. They just took a few minutes to vividly imagine things going well. So here are two concrete things to try. Thing number one, build a short positive imagery exercise into your backstage routine. This doesn't have to be especially elaborate. Before a lesson, a rehearsal, or an audition, take 2 or 3 minutes to close your eyes and vividly imagine things going the way you want them to go. Not just the outcome, but the experience. Like how you feel in your body when you're playing well, how your sound projects into the hall, what it's like when you're fully immersed in the music rather than worrying about what others might be thinking or the next tricky passage coming up. Thing number two, when negative thoughts do show up on stage, and they probably will, notice them, but don't automatically believe them. One of the findings that stood out to me in the study was the difference between the two groups and how the negative imagery group was significantly more likely to treat their intrusive thoughts as true. But hopefully, knowing that your inner critic tends to exaggerate and tends to exaggerate even more when it's been fed negative images in advance will make it a little easier to redirect your attention past those thoughts in the moment and give yourself permission to believe that things are probably going better than they feel. The goal, of course, being to focus more on the act of performing and creating and less on evaluating and judging. If any of this resonated and you'd like more specific tools on how to play more like yourself when it counts, I put together a free 7-day email course called Pressure Proof that walks you through 5 essential practice strategies that will help you shrink the gap between practice and performance. You'll find a link in the description below.